So let's say you have a private jet, a mid-size aircraft, right? Valued around, I don't know, $15 million. Dollars.
Okay, yeah, that's a solid asset.
Right, but it doesn't just sit on a tarmac for free. I mean, you've got insurance, hangar fees, you have to do these minimum maintenance run-ups.
Oh, and your baseline crew retention. You have to pay the pilots even if they aren't flying,
Exactly. So between all of that, that stationary piece of metal can burn through like $2,000 to $3,000 a single day.
which is wild when you actually do the math.
It is, because that's $60,000 to $90,000 a month just evaporating into thin air. So picture yourself as the broker. You're holding the exclusive mandate to sell that exact
And
aircraft.
the seller is definitely looking at their watch.
Oh, the clock is ticking, the cash is burning,
Hmm.
and you've done what the industry has always told you to do, right? You wrote up the spec sheet, took some really nice high-res photos, put them on your website.
Paid for the premium listing on one of those major aviation databases.
Right, but then you check the analytics a week later and there's just like almost zero traffic.
You're holding a $15 million masterpiece, and nobody is looking at it.
Yeah, your digital strategy is basically the equivalent of whispering in a hurricane.
That financial bleed,
Mm-hmm.
it's really the silent killer in this industry. It's a profound market failure, honestly.
Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We are stepping way out of the theoretical today and getting into the incredibly high-stakes, multi-million-dollar world of global aviation commerce.
And when we say high stakes, I mean, we aren't just talking about the massive price tags on these planes.
No, not at all. We are talking about wildly complex cross-border transactions. You're dealing with different sovereign jurisdictions, crazy ownership structures, and, physical assets that hurtle across the planet at Mach 0.80.
What's really fascinating here is that the general public only ever sees the glamour of it all.
Right, the champagne and the leather seats.
Exactly. They see a sleek Gulfstream or an Embraer touching down in Geneva or Aspen, but they have absolutely zero visibility into the sprawling, hyper-complex ecosystem required to actually transfer the ownership of that aircraft.
Like moving it from a seller in Germany to a buyer in South Africa.
Right. The actual mechanics of that trade are almost entirely hidden from view.
So, to help us map that hidden world, we've brought a really fascinating stack of sources to the table today.
And these aren't your typical marketing brochures either.
No, we have internal strategic positioning documents, interactive platform map schematics, and live marketplace profiles. And this is all from a company called Air Network.
The utility of these specific documents really cannot be overstated. Like I said, we are looking at glossy consumer ads designed to make you want to buy a jet.
Right, these are the operational blueprints of a global B2B ecosystem. We actually have access to the granular details of specific aircraft currently on the market.
We've got profiles of global brokerages and even the background infrastructure. The software and the ground services that keep these planes legally and safely in the sky.
So, the mission for this deep dive is to unpack that entire re-engineering process. We are going to explore how Air Network is fundamentally reshaping how aircraft are sold, how brokerages operate, and honestly, how global aviation visibility actually functions today.
And there is a central thesis we really need to test today. It's a phrase that echoes through, literally every single document in our stack.
Yes, in this industry, aircraft are not simply sold, they are placed.
Placed. It's such a deliberate, almost surgical word choice.
It really is.
It implies intention,
Yeah.
matchmaking, and a very heavy degree of curation. It completely rejects the standard retail model of selling.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that word choice sets up the hook for our whole conversation. The sources make this bold claim that being listed is one thing, but being remembered is everything.
Which brings us to the first major hurdle they identify, right? The visibility problem, or what they call the illusion of being listed.
Right, so explain the illusion.
Well, this is where we have to separate the internet of, say, 2005 from the internet of today. The traditional aviation brokerage model still relies super heavily on that legacy internet mindset.
Okay, how so?
So a broker, whether they're just a one-person independent shop or a solid mid-sized firm, they secure a mandate for a highly sought-after turbine aircraft.
A great plane, essentially.
A great plan. They run the standard playbook, they put it on their proprietary website, they syndicate it to a couple of legacy aircraft listing boards, and then they just wait.
Their primary strategy becomes waiting.
Exactly.
Okay, let me stop you right there because I have to push back on this premise just a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
I hear what you're saying about the legacy internet, but search engines are incredibly sophisticated now. if I'm a billionaire's family office manager and I am specifically tasked with buying, say, a 2004 Embraer Legacy 600.
Right. Very specific mandate.
Right. I'm going to go to Google or a major aviation database, and I'm going to type in exactly that. 2004 Embraer Legacy 600 for sale. And if the broker has done even basic SEO, I will find it.
You'll find a link to it, sure.
So why is passive visibility being framed as such a fatal flaw in these documents? If it's on the internet, isn't it technically visible to everyone?
It's a highly logical assumption, but it completely misunderstands the actual behavior of the ultra-high net worth buyer. And more importantly, their representatives.
Okay, walk me through that. What am I missing?
First, we have to look at the algorithms of those legacy listing sites. They basically operate on a recency bias.
Meaning they favor whatever is newest.
Exactly. When you upload that Embraer on a Tuesday, it's right at the top of the feed. You get an immediate tiny spike in impressions. But by Friday, it's been pushed down by 20 other listings.
And by the following month.
By the following month, it is effectively buried under pages of digital dust. Nobody is scrolling to page 9 to buy a jet.
So it's kind of like trying to sell a priceless, one-of-a-kind painting by just, hanging it in your own living room, leaving the blinds open, and hoping a billionaire art collector happens to walk past your specific window on the exact day you hung it up.
It's exactly like that. You are relying entirely on the hope that a buyer's exact moment of readiness perfectly intersects with your very brief window of algorithmic visibility.
Which is a huge gamble when you're talking about $15 million.
A massive gamble.
Yeah.
But more importantly, addressing your point about Google search, the family office manager might run that search, sure, but they aren't just looking for a piece of metal.
Right. They need to actually buy the thing.
They're looking for a transaction they can trust. A passive, static listing, just a spec sheet with a few photos, provides zero context, zero narrative, zero proof of competence.
In a market flooded with data, passive visibility is essentially invisibility.
Because it doesn't command attention, and it certainly doesn't build trust.
There's a line in the sources that really hammered this home for me. It says, the right aircraft with the wrong visibility can remain invisible.
That's a great line.
Right. You could literally have the exact serial number, the exact engine configuration, the exact interior layout that a buyer halfway across the world is looking for. But because you are relying on a static listing that died in the search rankings 3 months ago, that connection is just never made.
And that's because exposure in the aviation market cannot be a single, isolated event. It has to be a continuous pulse.
Why continuous?
Because the buying cycles in this industry are incredibly long. A corporate board might take like 18 months to finally decide to upgrade their fleet.
Oh, wow. 18 months?
Easily. A charter operator might spend a year analyzing market demand before pulling the trigger on an acquisition. So if your listing only actively lived for the first week you uploaded it, you were entirely absent from the buyer's peripheral vision during their actual decision-making phase.
Which brings us perfectly to the mechanism of the transaction itself, and why a static listing is just so dangerous. We really need to dissect this concept that aircraft are placed, not sold.
It's the core of the whole shift in the industry.
Right, because if I'm selling a used car, even a very expensive used car, a static listing works fine. The buyer searches, finds my car, comes over, kicks the tires, transfers the funds, registers it with the local DMV, and drives away. Done.
Yeah, that's a simple retail transaction.
Exactly. But our sources are militant about the fact that moving metal in the aviation industry is an entirely different universe of complexity.
Comparing an aircraft transaction to a car sale, or frankly even a commercial real estate transaction, just completely minimizes the unique legal and physical nature of the asset.
It's that different.
Well, absolutely. An aircraft is basically a highly regulated, highly mobile corporate entity that just happens to have wings.
Okay, let me read off some of the complexities detailed in the air network positioning documents, just to give everyone listening a real sense of scale here.
Go for it. It's a long list.
It is. When you transact a private aircraft, you are dealing with cross-border sales, import and export customs processes, regulatory compliance across conflicting global authorities.
Don't forget the financing.
Right. Wildly complex financing structures often involving multiple currencies. Then you have specialized aviation insurance, meticulous maintenance history audits, operator requirements, and massive jurisdictional tax differences.
And we need to pause here and realize that is just the administrative surface.
That's just the surface.
Just the surface.
Yeah.
Let's look at the maintenance audit you just mentioned. The physical condition of the plane is really only half the asset,
Okay, so what's the other half?
the paper trail. If a logbook has a gap from 3 years ago because a mechanic in a different country didn't properly document a minor repair according to the specific standards of the new buyer's Civil Aviation Authority, you have a massive problem.
Wait, like what kind of problem?
Like that $15 million aircraft might literally not be allowed to fly. It becomes a very heavy, very expensive paperweight until that documentation is forensically reconstructed.
Oh, wow. Which explains why the jargon in these documents is so incredibly dense. The sources mention things like a fresh C check or ADS-B out equipped or FMS NZ 6.1 avionics.
Right.
For someone outside the industry, that sounds like a totally foreign language.
It is a foreign language, and the fluency of the broker dictates the safety of the transaction.
Give me an example. What actually is a C check?
So for context, a C-check isn't like taking your car in for an oil change. It is a massive, heavy maintenance event. They practically pull the entire aircraft apart. They inspect the airframe for microfractures, check every major system, and then put it all back together.
That sounds expensive.
It can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes over $1 million, and take weeks or months to complete.
And what about that ADS-B out thing?
ADS-B out is a highly specific satellite surveillance technology. It's required by air traffic control in modern airspace. If a broker lists a plane without understanding the nuances of these requirements, they could sell a plane to a European buyer that legally cannot enter European airspace without a massive, unplanned retrofit.
That is a staggering amount of liability for a broker to take on. You're moving a physical machine across continents, but you're also moving a mountain of legal, regulatory, and financial risk.
If we connect this back to the bigger picture, this sheer complexity entirely redefines what a broker actually is.
How so?
Because of everything we just outlined, buyers and sellers don't just need to find a plane. They need to find a deeply competent representative.
Somebody who actually knows what they're doing.
Exactly. They need someone who understands how to deregister an aircraft with the FAA in the United States, navigate the value-added tax implications of flying it through the Isle of Man, and then legally re-register it with the South African Civil Aviation Authority.
While also making sure the maintenance tracking software talks to the new region's systems, I assume.
Precisely.
So a broker isn't really a salesperson at all. They are a massive orchestration project manager.
Exactly. And that is why the concept of placement is the only accurate term here. Placement requires an alignment of timing, extreme credibility, and proximity to the right buyer at the exact right moment.
And what's the glue holding all of that together?
Trust. Trust is the ultimate currency here. Because of these complexities, a buyer isn't just trusting that the engines will start.
Right. They are trusting that the broker's paperwork won't result in their new multi-million-dollar asset being impounded on a tarmac in a foreign country over a tax technicality.
Exactly.
This makes the fatal flaw of the traditional static listing so much more obvious to me now. If a broker just throws a spec sheet up on a website and walks away, they are communicating zero trust.
None. A static listing just says, here is a piece of metal.
Right. It completely fails to say, I possess the deep technical competence to safely guide this incredibly risky transaction across the finish line.
And that is the massive gap that legacy platforms have completely failed to bridge. They treat highly complex, high-liability assets like simple retail commodities.
They offer a digital shelf.
Right, when what the market actually requires is a secure, expertly managed pathway to ownership.
Okay, this perfectly tees up how Air Network is attempting to completely disrupt this model. The sources outline their solution, which is turning static listings into what they call living presentations.
Yes, the 365-day living presentation.
They actually describe Air Network as a 365-day aircraft circulation engine. So mechanically, how does a living presentation differ from a standard digital listing?
It's a radical departure in both technology and philosophy. Air Network abandons the once-off advertisement model entirely.
Because they know it doesn't work.
Right. They recognize that a listing's value shouldn't die the week it's uploaded. Instead, they built this CRM-integrated ecosystem designed to actively push and promote the aircraft continuously.
All year round?
All year round, across multiple audience touchpoints.
Okay, what does that actually look like in practice, though? How do you push a listing for a year without it just becoming annoying spam to the buyer?
By changing the narrative. A static listing is just static data. Year, make, model, total time on the airframe. But a living presentation is story-driven and dynamic.
Oh, interesting. Give me an example of how that narrative shifts.
So in month 1, the system might highlight the aircraft's newly completed interior refurbishment. They'd push that specific angle to charter operators who really care about passenger experience.
Makes sense.
Then in month 3, the presentation pivots. Now it highlights the fresh engine overhaul, targeting corporate buyers who are super focused on dispatch reliability and maintenance costs.
Okay, and in month 6?
In month 6, it might target operators in specific geographies, highlighting the aircraft's unique cross-continental range capabilities. The aircraft remains visible and relevant because the angle of the presentation adapts to different segments of the market over time.
I see the logic there, but I have to ask the skeptical question. Why the absolute obsession with 365-day circulation?
What do you mean?
Well, if I am a broker and Air Network is pushing my jet in front of a flight department manager today, but that manager doesn't have the budget approved to buy until next year, isn't that just wasted digital breath?
It seems like it, right?
Yeah, why expend energy circulating an asset to people who do not have their checkbooks open right this second?
That question highlights the exact legacy mindset Air Network is trying to dismantle. The source material explicitly addresses this.
What do they say?
They argue that the person seeing the aircraft today may not be in a position to buy today. But, and this is crucial, they may remember it.
The being remembered is everything part.
Exactly. They might mention it in a strategy meeting. They may forward the presentation to a colleague at a different flight department. And, most importantly, when their budget is approved 6 months from now, they already know exactly what aircraft is available and which broker represents it.
Ah, so you aren't hunting for the immediate transaction. You are engineering a network of awareness around the asset over a much longer time horizon.
Because visibility creates conversations. Conversations create opportunities. And opportunities create transactions.
That's a great progression.
In an industry where a sales cycle can take a year, from initial interest to final closing, you simply cannot afford to only be visible at the exact microsecond a buyer decides to act.
Because by the time they announce they are ready, they are already calling the brokers who have stayed top of mind.
Right. It's planting seeds. You are establishing the competence of the broker and the quality of the aircraft long before the actual moment of transaction occurs.
And that continuous exposure is what transforms a cold, risky listing into a familiar, trusted asset in the marketplace. It dramatically lowers the psychological friction when the buyer is finally ready to engage.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Up to this point, we've talked a lot about the aircraft itself, the physical metal. But the Air Network documents shift focus significantly toward the people selling them, the brokers themselves.
And there's a specific phrase they use repeatedly for this.
Yes. For brokers, having a profile on Air Network is like owning digital real estate inside the aviation industry.
It's a powerful metaphor, and it's totally central to understanding how they are trying to restructure the market.
Let's think about the typical broker we described earlier. They might be incredibly skilled, right? They might understand every nuance of cross-border tax law. They operate a boutique firm, and they secure amazing mandates.
But they are virtually invisible outside their immediate network.
Exactly. The sources argue you aren't just renting a billboard for a week. You are building a permanent headquarters.
That distinction between renting attention and building presence is the core of their value proposition for the broker.
Explain that difference, renting versus building.
When you pay for a standard listing on a legacy site, you are just renting a billboard. The moment the listing expires or the moment that specific aircraft sells, your presence on that platform vanishes.
You basically drop back to zero.
You go back to zero. But owning digital real estate means your brand, your track record, and your authority remain permanently visible, actively circulating, regardless of what inventory you happen to be holding at that specific moment.
And this ties directly into a specific feature the sources highlight, which is Air Network's verified broker profiles. How exactly does a broker get verified, and why is this verification layer so critical to the whole ecosystem?
Well, the documents suggest the verification isn't just a basic email confirmation. It's a real audit of professional standing.
Oh, like they actually check your credentials.
Yeah. While they don't give away the entire proprietary backend in these documents, it implies checking a broker's track record, ensuring they have legitimate, direct mandates from sellers.
As opposed to what?
As opposed to just reposting other people's listings, which is honestly a plague in this industry. And they also confirm their regulatory standing. And the why brings us right back to that concept of risk we talked about.
Right, because buyers and sellers hate uncertainty. I mean, if I am wiring $1 million deposit into an escrow account, I am intensely evaluating the person on the other end of the transaction.
Precisely. The buyer is asking, who is actually behind this mandate? Do they actually have direct contact with the owner? Can they navigate the complexities of this specific jurisdictional transfer?
So by heavily verifying brokers, Air Network is engineering authority and trust before the first phone call even takes place.
It fundamentally changes the psychology of the initial contact.
I can see that. If a buyer sees a verified broker profile and that profile showcases their active mandates, their closed deals, their specific regional expertise, and it's all living in this 365-day continuous presentation, the baseline of trust is already established.
Right, you aren't cold calling a stranger anymore. You are contacting a verified professional within a known ecosystem.
The verified profile acts as a proxy for competence.
It telegraphs to the market, I am a permanent vetted fixture in this industry. I am not a fly-by-night operator trying to flip a plane.
That digital real estate is arguably just as valuable to the broker's long-term business as the multi-million-dollar mandate itself.
Oh, absolutely, because without the trust generated by that real estate, the mandate is basically useless.
Okay, let's ground this theory in some physical geography. A major challenge in aviation, which, as an aside, is incredibly ironic for an industry entirely based on the premise of global mobility, is that brokers are often fiercely strong regionally, but completely limited internationally.
It's a classic geographic bottleneck.
Right. A broker might know every single aircraft owner in Texas or every charter operator in Western Europe, but the global market outside their time zone is a complete black box.
The sources capture this perfectly with a quote. It says, your next client may be 8,000 nautical miles away, or less than a mile away. How would you know?
I love that quote, and we actually have vivid, real-world examples from the live marketplace profiles in our stack that illustrate this beautifully. Let's look at Howarth Aviation, based down in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Led by David Howarth, right?
Yes, David Howarth. The profile notes they specialize in tailored aviation solutions with deep, entrenched relationships in the South African market.
Which is a textbook example of high-value regional expertise. The Southern African market has very specific operational requirements.
Like what?
Well, you're dealing with high altitudes, hot temperatures, often requiring rugged aircraft for mining or remote operations. A local broker understands those nuances intuitively.
Exactly. Now, let's jump continents. We have a profile for Liftwing Aviation operating out of Germany. They are actively trying to place a 2004 Embraer Legacy 600.
That's a serious piece of machinery.
The specs on this are serious. I'm looking at the document here, and it says, fresh C-check completed in March 2026. Engines are fully enrolled in maintenance programs. It has that ADS-B out equipment we discussed earlier, and upgraded FMS NZ 6.1 avionics.
Wow, yeah, this is a heavy-hitting aircraft. It's got a 4,000 nautical mile range.
Highly capable.
Highly capable, and governed by strict European Union Aviation Safety Agency EASA regulations, which a German broker would be intimately familiar with.
Right, and let's cross the Atlantic for our third example, Stratos Aerosales, based in Los Angeles, USA.
Okay, what do they have?
They are representing a beautifully upgraded 1999 Beechcraft King Air B200. It has a fresh, hot section inspection on its Pratt & Whitney engines, a brand new 2025 interior, and it's ready for immediate deployment.
Awesome.
So we have Johannesburg, Munich, and Los Angeles. 3 totally distinct markets, 3 different regulatory environments, 3 different types of aviation expertise.
And this is exactly where the architecture of a global ecosystem becomes critical. Air Network is designed to solve the geographic bottleneck for all 3 of these entities simultaneously.
It gives the regional broker immediate international reach.
And it gives the international buyer frictionless regional access.
Break the mechanics of that down for me. How does that connection actually happen without a massive chain of intermediaries getting in the way?
Let's use the Embraer Legacy 600 in Germany as the case study.
Okay.
Liftwing Aviation understands the European business aviation market flawlessly. But an aircraft with a 4,000 nautical mile range is inherently a global asset.
Right, it can fly anywhere.
So the ideal buyer for that specific Legacy 600 might not be a corporation in Frankfurt or a charter company in Paris. The absolute perfect buyer might be an operator based in Johannesburg, looking to rapidly expand their fleet for cross-continental flights throughout Africa.
But historically, without a unified global platform, how would that Johannesburg operator ever find that specific German broker?
They largely wouldn't. Or the process would require this incredibly convoluted chain of intermediaries.
Like a broker calling a broker calling a broker.
Exactly. The Johannesburg buyer would call a local broker who would call a contact in London who might know someone in Munich. Each link in that chain adds friction, adds delay, and usually demands a cut of the commission.
Which completely misaligns the incentive.
Exactly. But on Air Network, that 2004 Embraer is part of a living presentation circulating globally. The verified German broker is directly visible to the buyer in South Africa. Liftwing's regional European expertise is amplified to a global audience without diluting the communication.
And the exact same logic applies to Stratos Aerosales in LA with the King Air. I mean, a King Air B200 is a legendary workhorse.
Oh yeah, they can land on dirt strips, grass, anything.
Right. So the buyer who needs an upgraded turboprop with fresh engine inspections might not be in California at all. It might be a mining executive in Western Australia who needs it for rugged outback operations.
The buyer is 8,000 miles away.
But Air Network's architecture connects the LA mandate directly with the Australian operational need.
What this does is democratize global reach. You no longer need to be a massive multinational brokerage firm with physical offices in 50 countries to sell globally.
You just need the right digital real estate within a connected ecosystem.
Air Network becomes the bridge. It ensures that a perfectly maintained, highly valuable asset isn't artificially constrained by the physical zip code of the broker who holds the paperwork.
So what does this all mean for the underlying philosophy of matchmaking? Because the narrative running through these internal documents strongly suggests that Air Network's ultimate goal is to move relationships, not just aircraft.
That is probably the most profound shift in the entire strategy. Traditional platforms are purely transactional.
They just want to make the sale today.
Right. They are built on the assumption of immediate intent. They are designed to only speak to the person who woke up this morning and said, I need to buy a jet today. Let me go search.
They're essentially digital vending machines.
That's a perfect way to put it. But Air Network operates on a relationship-driven, long-tail philosophy. They cast a massively wider net.
They aren't just trying to intercept today's active buyer.
No, they are systematically engaging what the industry calls the hidden audience.
The hidden audience, that's a really evocative term. Who exactly makes up this audience? We aren't talking about aviation enthusiasts tracking flights on an app, right?
No, this is a highly targeted B2B audience. We are talking about charter operators, flight crew, aviation businesses, maintenance facilities, investors, and high net worth entrepreneurs who are future buyers.
Even if they don't know it yet. I have to challenge this, though. Why spend marketing capital targeting the flight crew? A commercial pilot or a corporate first officer isn't writing a $15 million check for a Gulfstream.
They are writing the check, but they are absolutely holding the pen.
What do you mean?
Think about the power dynamics in a high net worth flight department. When the billionaire owner is tired of their current aircraft's range limitations and decides they want to upgrade, they don't go to Google.
Who do they go to?
They call their chief pilot. They say, what should we get next and who should we buy it from?
Oh.
Right. And if that chief pilot has been continuously exposed to a specific verified broker's living presentations on Air Network for the past 2 years, who do you think they're going to recommend to the boss?
Oh, wow. That is the literal definition of B2B influencer marketing. You're building mindshare with the entire technical ecosystem that surrounds and advises the end buyer.
It is the ultimate long game. By keeping your brand and your aircraft visible to a maintenance manager, a charter dispatcher, or a line pilot today, you are turning that individual into a conduit for a massive sale tomorrow.
You are moving relationships through the ecosystem, and those relationships eventually move the metal.
Exactly. A static listing platform simply doesn't have the architecture to play that game.
That makes complete strategic sense. And it leads us perfectly into what is arguably the most visually striking part of our sources today, the layers of this global ecosystem.
The map interface, yeah.
Yes, we have actual schematic screenshots of Air Network's interactive global map interface. And looking at this, it proves that the company views itself as vastly more than just a sales platform.
The map interface is the physical manifestation of everything we've discussed so far. It visualizes the gravity of the ecosystem.
Let's walk through it because the sheer density of data here is incredible. You open this interactive map and you don't just see little airplane icons for sale.
No, it's way deeper than that.
You see distinct layers. It's digital real estate divided into highly specific operational sectors.
Naturally, you have the aircraft sales layer as the foundation.
Huh.
But immediately adjacent to that, you have the charter and empty legs layer.
Yes. The sources highlight specific notes here, like there's a live board running in Dubai for empty legs, which are discounted repositioning flights, and something called Executive Charter Command in London, operating a 24/7 charter desk.
Now, apply the logic we just discussed about the hidden audience to that charter layer. A client who frequently charters heavy jets out of London is the prime demographic to eventually transition into whole aircraft ownership.
Of course.
So by integrating the live charter market directly into the map, Air Network is capturing and engaging the future buyer pool before they even realize they want to buy.
Then we move to the maintenance layer. This includes MROs, maintenance, repair, and overhaul facilities, parts suppliers, engine shops, and camo software.
We should probably define CAMO for the listener.
Yeah, go ahead.
It stands for Continuing Airworthiness Management Organization. These are the entities responsible for tracking every hour an aircraft flies, every cycle on the engines, and scheduling mandatory maintenance.
An aircraft without a robust camo and maintenance infrastructure is just a very expensive paperweight.
Exactly. By putting maintenance on the map, Air Network allows a buyer to see exactly where and how their new asset will be supported regionally.
And then there's an insurance layer. The map highlights providers for standard aircraft hull coverage, but also highly specialized products like crew insurance, passenger liability, and even loss of license protection for pilots.
Which is a huge deal for professional pilots.
The documents actually show an image of a Seneca twin-engine aircraft flying over water to highlight these specific operational risks.
Again, this is about systematically eliminating friction. In the legacy model, you find the plane, and then you have to go out into the wilderness to find a broker, and then hunt for an insurer who understands aviation, and then find a maintenance facility.
It's totally disjointed.
Right. Here, you find the plane, you connect with the verified broker, and right there in the exact same digital ecosystem, you find all the risk mitigation solutions.
The map even pushes into emerging tech. There's a drone technology layer. We have an image here of a DJI FPV drone operator. It maps drone pilots, commercial drone training centers, and new drone technology.
It's literally pulling the future of unmanned aviation right into the current manned ecosystem.
And my personal favorite layer, which really shows they understand the culture of the industry, is an aviation accessories layer. There's this great picture highlighting silver airplane cufflinks and pilot gear.
It taps into the lifestyle, not just the hard mechanics.
It creates a totally comprehensive, sticky environment. But the true power of this map isn't just the categories, right? It's the specific, verified partnerships that actually populate these layers.
Exactly.
Let's talk about those real-world partners, because the sources gave us some fascinating examples of who is actually buying this digital real estate. Down in Qatar, we have a profile for the Doha Sky Lounge.
That's a premium FBO, right?
Yes, a premium fixed-base operator. For those unfamiliar, an FBO isn't just a fancy waiting room. They handle the ground support, the fueling, the catering, the customs clearance, and the operational coordination for private jets.
Doha Sky Lounge operates in one of the Middle East's most critical aviation hubs, and they are a verified partner on this network.
And this is where we have to ask. Why does a platform dedicated to aircraft sales care about a ground handling facility in Doha?
That is exactly the right question to ask.
So what does this all mean? Why spend platform resources integrating an FBO?
If we connect this back to the core concept of placement, you cannot effectively place an aircraft without solving for the surrounding operational infrastructure.
Okay.
Let's say our verified broker in Germany is selling that Embraer legacy to a corporate operator who frequently flies routes through the Middle East.
Right.
Being able to connect that buyer directly with a trusted premium FBO like Doha Sky Lounge within the same platform adds massive tangible value to the relationship.
It demonstrates deep operational market knowledge beyond just the transaction of the metal.
Precisely. It changes the broker's pitch from here's a plane you can buy to here's the plane and here's exactly how you can successfully operate it in your target region.
And the ecosystem integration gets even deeper. Let's look at the other major example from the sources, AirTech in South Africa.
Yes, this one really surprised me too.
AirTech is an aviation contract operations and leasing company, but the sources include an actual promotional flyer they ran on the network. They hosted a pilot open day on May 15th, 2026.
They literally used Air Network to recruit commercial pilots.
Yes, the flyer specifies requirements.
Mhm.
They want a commercial pilot license, an updated CV, a valid medical certificate, and they are conducting on-site interviews. I have to admit, I was completely stumped by this at first.
Why?
Why on earth is an aircraft sales and brokerage network hosting job fairs for pilot recruitment?
Because buyers need pilots. It's the ultimate bottleneck.
Right, you can't fly without them.
An operator in Johannesburg buying 3 new turboprops to expand their fleet cannot generate a single dollar of revenue until they have qualified crew to fly those specific airframes.
Ah, I see.
So by integrating pilot networks and active aviation jobs into the map, Air Network is preemptively solving the absolute next problem the buyer is going to face before the buyer even has a chance to stress about it.
It creates inescapable gravity?
That is exactly the right term. Network gravity.
When you integrate all of these seemingly disparate divisions, sales, charter, freight logistics, pilot recruitment, market intelligence, heavy maintenance, premium FBOs, you create an ecosystem with massive gravitational pull.
The switching costs become incredibly high. You might log on initially just to look at the specs on a King Air,
Yeah.
but you stay because you need to hire a first officer, you connect with an FBO in Qatar for your next trip, and you arrange your hull insurance.
And the broker who builds their digital headquarters inside this ecosystem is infinitely more powerful than the broker sitting alone on an isolated static website hoping for a Google search.
They cease to be just salespeople. They become the trusted navigators of a comprehensive global organism. And that is why their digital real estate is fundamentally reshaping the market.
This has been an absolutely phenomenal deep dive. We have covered a massive amount of ground today, from the hidden regulatory complexities of cross-border transfers to the psychology of the ultra-high net worth buyer.
It's a whole new world.
To bring this full circle for everyone listening, in the high-stakes, multi-million-dollar world of global aviation, visibility is no longer a luxury. It is hard currency.
Absolutely.
Whether you are an independent one-man brokerage, a boutique acquisition specialist, or a massive regional aviation business, the era of passive visibility is dead.
The static listing is just a relic of the early internet at this point. The future of this industry belongs entirely to the 365-day living presentation.
You cannot just list a $15 million machine and hope for the best. It must be actively, strategically placed.
And placement requires continuous, authoritative, relationship-driven circulation.
It requires an ecosystem that seamlessly connects the regional expert in Johannesburg or Los Angeles with the global buyer in Europe or Australia. And it surrounds that transaction with the necessary infrastructure of trust, from camo software tracking the maintenance logs, to ground handlers in Doha, to pilot recruitment in South Africa.
This systemic shift raises a really important, broader question, though, and it's something I want to leave the listener to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've spent the last hour analyzing how Air Network is successfully turning highly complex, multi-million-dollar physical assets into these dynamic, living digital presentations that rely entirely on continuous visibility and ecosystem matchmaking.
Right. It's a completely new paradigm for aviation.
But if this model is becoming the new baseline standard for an asset as complex and highly regulated as an aircraft, how long will it be before other high-value, high-complexity B2B industries are forced to adapt?
Oh, that's a fascinating pivot.
Think about commercial real estate. Think about the superyacht industry or massive corporate mergers and acquisitions.
Right.
How long until the brokers in those spaces realize that their static listing models are completely obsolete and they are forced to adopt this exact 365-day digital real estate philosophy just to survive in a market that demands continuous, verified trust?
That is a staggering thought. If you're trying to sell a $50 million commercial office building with a static web page and a few nice photos, you are playing a game that ended yesterday.
The gravity of the ecosystem model is eventually coming for all high-value commerce.
It's not just aviation. It is the inevitable evolution of how high-value assets change hands in the digital age.
Completely agree.
Well, we will definitely be keeping an eye on that horizon to see which industry falls next. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the invisible, high-stakes world of global aviation commerce. Remember, whether you are trying to move a private jet, place a commercial helicopter, or just looking to understand the future of high-value asset ecosystems, being listed is one thing, but being remembered is everything. See you next time.